around 50% pertains to the year 2011-12. Although the tax authorities have taken various steps to reduce litigation, the most recent example being notification of the safe harbor rules for transfer pricing, long litigation cycle still remains an inherent risk to the business and threatens to take off the competitive edge as it retards the process of planning for the future. Litigation, therefore, is as much a risk to the business as business cycles or any of the economic slowdowns that we keep seeing, which necessitates a suitable mitigation of litigation risk through efficient planning and overall management. Accordingly, LexisNexis, the global information provider in the legal, tax and regulatory domain, along with Bloomberg TV, brings you this very pertinent and timely conversation on mitigating tax litigation or managing tax litigation in India.
Is this kind of tax litigation, you said you've been a litigator all your life, and this kind of tax litigation is unprecedented that you've seen in last couple of years, or is it something that you think is a natural progression and evolved because of the kind of transactions that we are seeing in today's day and age?
I think it is sort of unprecedented, certainly, but it is as a result of the way businesses happen because of globalization, because you do more trans-border transactions, the economy that what is happening in the economy, the kind of transactions, the complexity of the transactions. I think it's all as a result of that. The more complex the transactions, the tax department tries to decipher those in its own way. And you're bound to see different kinds of litigation. We still haven't faced such a large issues regarding internet transactions. Where is the jurisdiction? How are you going to deal with it? There have been a few decisions, I'm aware of those, but I think that's something that's going to come up more and more as we see more e-commerce happening. So the more evolved business gets, you will see more complex tax issues also coming up.
How justified is this entire criticism when it comes to Indian tax authorities and their so-called aggressiveness or overzealous approach, given that it's not something which is unique to India? There is aggressive tax issues, authorities in the other jurisdictions as well.
I think tax authorities across the world are the same. I don't think there's much difference. It's just when, it takes a little more than just being aggressive for a court to make a comment, let's protect our FDI, let's not hound away FDI, let's not hound an SSC. I think those are the telling comments of how a tax department behaves. For the tax department to recover tax is but normal and but natural. You go to the United States, the IRS is going to be as tough on you as on anybody else. So I don't see, but when they cross that limit, when there's a disconnect between what government says on the one hand and what the tax department does exactly the opposite, that's where the disconnect is happening at times, and that's why it's inviting the comments from the court that the courts are making today.
The issues like Vodafone are still haunting us.
It is. You go out anywhere, you talk to any investor, they're still not certain of, there's no certainty as to contract regime, there's no certainty as to tax regime, and there's no certainty as to policy.
And it's
a complete recipe for disaster for investments into India.
All right. Let me get your thoughts, Mr. Lakshmi Kumar, as far as the tax litigation is concerned. What are your views on that? And of course, do you believe in that criticism with Indian tax authorities being little to overzealous in comparison to other jurisdictions?
I think I will answer this question slightly differently. If you look at the tax department, the number of officers have not increased dramatically. But if you take the legislations, like for example, new service tax, what she was talking about, or the amendments are made into the income tax, etc., they require enormous amount of manpower, even from the government side, to implement and administer them. There is a sheer, I would say, lack of manpower available there. Having said that, with regard to the approach, in India, I think we have complicated the matter too much. An assessing officer, when he sees the depth of his argument, correctness of the argument, etc., he's still afraid to pass an order in your favor, in spite of the favorable decisions in your favor by the courts. One is the fear of the unknown. Second, the audit. Third, control general audit. And if these things are not enough, Central Vigilance Commission. Even why should I get into all those things, etc.? Let me pass an order against and let the court decide. This attitude I have seen several times. In some of the hearings, the commissioners say very clearly, sir, I know you have got an excellent case, but I would rather like a safe route. In olden days, they say that when you are in doubt, here is the revenue. So revenue officers used to say, when you are in doubt, here is the revenue. Today, when you are not in doubt also, here is the revenue. So that is the position. Therefore, there is an element of definitely the so-called aggressiveness. Third, when I look at, say for example, how the tax administration deals with the type of issues they say in Europe. Whenever there is an audit, or supposed to be an audit takes place in Europe, the officers spend a week or 10 days, 15 days as the case may be with a client, with their premise, in the premises, take out 10 or 15 issues and then issue the memo to them at their point of time, spot memos. And they give time to the taxpayers, 1 month, 2 months, to respond. And they can come with their lawyers in the same room and they can discuss. Wherever they are getting convinced out of their 10 points, 7 are dropped. These 3 we are not agreeing on this particular principle, therefore you may have to pay up. The companies also feel like 7 they have dropped, these 3 are this, etc., we'll pay. The number of litigations are enormously less because the powers have been given and are properly utilized, and no hounding of the officers if they take the proper decisions. But unless that thing changes in India, and if it changes, we can see a drastic reduction in the tax litigations in India, definitely. But that attitude changes doesn't take place. Any amount of simplification of law is not going to result in reduction in litigation.
Phil, may I just add one thing? You know, when we see more complex forms of business transaction, which not everybody can understand, you know, they are rather complex today because for different reasons, you know, and because you're dealing with tax regimes of 3 different jurisdictions at the same time and 3, different subsidiaries, 2 businesses, and so many issues happen. And when the tax authority does not understand that transaction or the purpose behind the transaction or the objective behind the transaction, everything is viewed suspiciously. And then you add to that what Lakshmi has just said, that you have the CAG and you have the Vigilance Commissioner and everybody sitting. You're just petrified of taking it to first. You don't understand the complexity. Instead of trying to understand it, and if you haven't sort of been up to date with what's happening globally, you are going to have a problem with dealing with
And then you have a fear if you are not taking an action, perhaps that will be pulled up.
And such a large deal, an $11 billion deal, and how is it not taxed? So let's find some way to tax it in India. I mean, that's how it's sort of, come to.
All right. You made a very important point as far as, whether it's the bar or the bench, there are as many people and that's not really grown. But look at the conditions as far as the tribunals are concerned, and therefore perhaps that, would you believe, be also an important part in terms of the delay? Now, I remember just about a month or so back, the Bombay High Court gave a short judgment but pulled up the state government, saying that, your cess tax is so much of money is stuck in litigation, there's nothing, nobody's wanting to come and sit and be part of the income tax appellate tribunal because your service conditions are not in line with basic needs for anybody to come in and be part of it. How do you think those issues will become very critical in terms of speeding dispute resolution really for companies in that sense?
Well, that's very important. You see, you have to recognize, again, I go back to the years that we were starting our practice. The tribunal was very respected even in the courts and below. You got justice, and that's explained by so many of the tribunal members. Mr. Meenakshi Sundaram, Mr. Ranganathan went to the Supreme Court, went to the high courts, and did a great job. Even now we have a person from the tribunal who have appeared before, who is the sitting judge of the Delhi High Court. Excellent member. The point is, you've got to continue to encourage people to join that institution. And I guess, in some ways, the bar is not growing. So people who are good get an opportunity to see for themselves that they can practice in those forums and do extremely well, because there is a very limited bar. I mean, even the tribunal, I'll give you an example, CIT appeals, for example. You can no longer find, frankly, a lawyer of, even 10 years standing who will be willing to appear, or 15 years standing who will be willing to appear before the CIT appeals. And contrary to, what we believe that people want only CS to appear, I think things have changed a lot, particularly US companies. If you go back, we practiced tax under the Commonwealth principle, like in the UK, where the accountants ran the tax practice. The moment we started dealing with US companies in the 90s, I found they wanted the lawyers to run the tax practice and head the tax, be very deeply involved with the tax administration in their companies. And they did try, even within their own companies in-house, to try and instill this, but I know it hasn't happened that much, but certainly they want to talk to lawyers. But if the bar is not going to grow, and you're not going to get people appearing before DRP, you're not going to get people appearing before CIT appeals, the bar is shrinking, so people who are good, why would they want to be elevated to the tribunal? And what is in it for them? So it depends. You have to create, obviously, that environment. We have the same problem in the judiciary. It's not an exception. You've got vacancies in almost every court.
Absolutely.
Where you're not. So it's not particular to the tribunal. But I think it's one institution which can be, which is already doing a great job, because it's the final fact-finding authority. Remember that it's very powerful. The facts that it determines cannot be questioned by the High Court or the Supreme Court. So you've got to make sure this institution, which is the first independent institution in the litigation hierarchy, because you've got all the other institutions, CIT appeals and DRP, are within the department. This is the first time you're stepping out. This institution, you're right, needs to be strengthened constantly.
All right. Also, as I was asking Pallavi about the whole Vodafone issue, any tax conversation will not have the Vodafone issue being spoken about. Or, for example, the fears that GAR brought in. Of course, it's deferred, but I don't believe it's really out from the concerned arena. Do the moves such as the safe harbor norms or to the APA you were talking about, would those be good answers to address those concerns, or will it take time till we are able to allay all those fears?
See, Vodafone is a different issue. Vodafone is about the legislature changing in the mind of the taxpayer, changing its position post the event. That you had a law, I acted under the law, you have retroactively made me liable for something that I admittedly by law, as laid down by the Supreme Court, which lays down the law of the land, I was not liable for that. Let's put that aside, because it's hugely controversial and it is what it is. I do want to address this point that I don't think the tax department doesn't understand the transactions. I think the tax department's understanding, if you have been familiar with some of the orders they've written, you look at the preparation on Vodafone, it's fantastic. I can assure you a law firm dealing with tax would find it difficult to put together that kind of material. You may not agree with it, but you can't say that they went into it ill-prepared or they didn't know the transaction. They know what it is. The question is, it's a very emotive question. If you ask somebody else this question from a financial standpoint, gains are all in India. Does the mere share of an offshore company take away the taxing right of the country where the gain has actually originated? It's a very, very emotive issue. It's not, it's not the end of the world. We are not what the tax department is saying is not the end of the world. But I think that insofar as all these dispute resolution mechanisms are concerned, like the APA, the advanced ruling, the safe harbors, I think they're all a step in the right direction. All of it is also going to depend a bit on how it is implemented. In certain ways, I think it goes to what Lakshmi's point is, that there is a fear psychosis, not just in the tax department, in any policy maker today. When you can rope in a secretary 10 years after he's retired, why would you take a decision? And remember, the tax department, to their credit, are people who take decisions. Because the assessing officer, whether it is a $5 billion order or a 5 rupee order, he has to pass the order before it becomes barred by limitation. He can't rely on his boss to say, my boss told me to sign the order. It's his order which doesn't exist in the rest of the services. So all of these are going to assist. I think like when you have safe harbor, I personally think that the thresholds are very high. I don't know how many people are going to agree at those kind of levels to offer, but at least it's taken away this concern with the assessing officer that am I doing the right thing and not doing the right thing. But truly to create a beyond that as well, because they all have their limitations, but they are all steps in the right direction. But an omnibus mechanism for settlement we have to change our own thinking. As a nation, we get so excited. A person will give a relief at that time. We'll be Lakshmi and I will say, listen, what a honest officer and what a strong officer. Tomorrow the same guy, because CAG will pick up some point, you will have the same media channel saying, rogue, he was on the payroll, he'll do this. So where do you expect them to go? So we've got to decide as a nation also that are we willing to give people power, and are we going to keep questioning them, second guessing them, looking at it from 15 different points of view, कि ये consentive क्यों दिया, उसको relief क्यों दिया? If that's what we're going to do, nothing is going to succeed.
All right, let me get your view as far as the entire concern as far as transfer pricing and issues that are thereof as you deal with it day in and day out. Do these mechanisms such as safe harbors, etc., are giving you some sort of comfort factor, given that there are uncertainties around, also as it's been said?
Definitely, it's a welcome move by the government, and more so to put to rest and show a positive frame of mind to the taxpayers. These have been introduced. These are there in the international transfer pricing countries where they are practiced for more than 2 decades. So this is a very welcome move, and we are very quick in getting these APAs and safe harbors in 10 years of our implementing the transfer pricing rules. Having said that, I would like to say it's safe harbor particularly is more to bunch the small fishes in the pond. Why I say so is Rangachari committee has brought out these aspects and seen that yes, these have to be in line with whatever is the small and medium size enterprises have to be done for the transfer pricing audit and adjustment. The rates are very high, like it's 20, 22, 29, 30, 25. This is actually what they have done, as it's my personal view once again. What they have done is they have bunched all the comparable companies' margins and arrived at a arithmetic mean of that and put it as a safe harbor. Looks like that. 20 in itself is a high margin when compared to the international margins which are there. Whether it's US, UK, Australia, Canada, where they have been practicing in transfer pricing audits and litigations, it has been ranging between 5 to 10%. Of course, our policymakers always claim that there is a locational advantage to this whole thing, and that's why our margins are more. And the comparable companies also make that much of margin. Having said that, this entire safe harbor, if you see the distinctions they are making between a contract R&D vis-a-vis a software development center, there is always a thin line of difference. And what the rules have said is KPO means, and they have said this, namely. Are they the people to decide that? What is a KPO? What is a ITES? Are they to define that? Can they cluster all those things within that definition itself? Once again, it's interpretative. And it might lead to a set of litigations following through.
Sure.
And in fact, safe harbor, once I opt for, I go to the TPO, within 30 days the TPO will have to say under which category I would be, whether I would be in a KPO or I would be in IT, yes.
Okay.
And these type of issues will complicate once again rather than simplify.
All right.
So these have to be ironed out clearly at the policy level itself and made black and white. See, I need 20%. I say you say you are in IT, yes, and you define who are you. And as a business, as a institution, I know where I fall under. And you don't need to define me and classify me and say that no, I will be falling under this or that. And if you see a development center vis-a-vis a contract, the skill set of that software engineer would be same. The same person, whether it's application software development or original software development, how does it matter when he is sitting in front of a system and developing that program?
So essentially you're saying it's a welcome step, but there are things that needs to be ironed out, and that's what we'll have to see.